have great memories of this country when I was a kid, you know, and I used to come up here with my dad, and I want the boys to have the same memories. I would look around you, Roman, for God's sakes. This is beautiful country here. Take a good look.
I'll tell you what I see when I look out there, if you want to know.
Yeah, I'm curious.
I see the underdeveloped resources of northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I see a syndicated development consortium exploiting over $1.5 billion in forest products. I see a paper mill, and if the strategic metals are there, a mining operation. A greenbelt between the condos on the lake and a waste management facility, focusing on the newest rage in toxic waste, medical refuse, infected bandages, body parts, IV tubing, contaminated glassware, entrails, syringes, fluid, blood, low-grade radioactive waste, all safely contained, sunken in the lake, and sealed for centuries. Now, I ask you, what do you see?
I just see trees.
Hey, good morning, everyone. The great late John Candy, Canada's claim to fame. Hey, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Thanks for joining the meeting place this morning, wherever it is you're joining in from. Just a reminder to send in pictures. Even if you've sent pictures in before, send pictures in of what you're watching on, who you're watching with, whether that be a human or a pet. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, what those pictures do is they encourage us all and remind us that even though we're kind of scattered out throughout Nanaimo and the island and probably the province, maybe even the world, we're still together as a family. And so make sure you send those in. The address is on your screen. Another way that we can feel connected is through TMP Hangouts. And on behalf of the staff, I have to say we lied, because we said 2 weeks ago we were done. That was it. But the weather, although it's foggy, it's a great day to hang out again. So we're going to do another one today, 1 o'clock, same 2 locations, Neck Point or Parksville Beach. You choose which one you want to go to. Just bring a chair and a smile. We'll do it all social distancing. The last one we had was fantastic. I saw people there that I hadn't seen pretty much since March or April, and it was great to be able to catch up with them. So if that's something that, you know, if you've got some time this afternoon, make sure you stop by. 1 o'clock today. The weather's great for it. The other thing we're doing is we're going to be gathering, staying online, and we're going to be celebrating communion, which is the time that we remember and reflect on the greatest demonstration of love this world has ever seen. If you've never been, this is a great time to check it out from the comfort of your own home, but we hope you'll all stick around. It's going to happen right after the message. Band's going to play a song, and we're going to do communion and then sing a couple more songs, so make sure you hang around for that. Now, as Peter mentioned, today we're kicking off a new series called Perspective. And the whole premise behind this series is we're going to be exploring ways that the Bible teaches, ways that we can stay positive and hopeful in a rather negative world, because, man, there is no shortage of bad news out there, right? Every day it is shot at us like water out of a fire hose. We're just inundated with it. If it's not news about all the infections and all the deaths caused by COVID, whether in Canada, the U.S., around the world, it's the crazy election campaigns that are going on. It's just like, is this real? It's forest fires. There's news about social unrest, the economy, and the instability of the economy. And here's the thing, whether you're a news watcher or not, it's hard to escape all the bad news that's out there. One of the ways you can do that is go to Disneyland. But you know what? Disneyland, the happiest place on earth. I don't know if you've ever been there, but when you go there and you walk through the gates, it's like the rest of the world just melts away and disappears. Well, that's not even an option right now. This past Monday, here's some more bad news for you. They announced the layoffs of 28,000 workers due to the downturn in business. You can't even go to Disneyland to get away from this stuff. And so the question becomes, what can all of us do to escape all the negativity that surrounds us? Well, we could do what Doug Hurley and Bob Benkin did back on May 30th of this year. And you may be thinking, well, who the heck is Doug Hurley and Bob Benkin? And what do? Well, they quite literally escaped all the madness and the craziness of this world by being the latest astronauts to fly to the International Space Station aboard SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. And I remember, I don't know if you watched that. It was a big deal. It's the first time they had sent anyone in one of the rockets, but they made it. And I remember hearing about it and thinking to myself, now those two guys, they've got it right. Just get off the planet. Just get me off this rock. Because there's days that I felt just that way. I just want to get off this planet. Apparently, if you want to go that option, to escape all the craziness here, in 2022, in spring of 2022, there's another flight going up, and the public can go on it. There's 2 seats left, $55 million each. So if you want to do that, you can sign up for that. But obviously, that's not an option for most of us, if not all of us here, or 99.999% of the rest of the population. And so the question remains, what can you and I do to escape, or at least minimize, the effect of all the negativity around us? Well, that's what we're going to look at this morning, and the answer may surprise you. I'm going to start off by kind of bringing something that you probably know is there, but I'm going to bring your attention to it. Have you ever noticed how you and I can be quite particular and picky about what we put into the things that matter to us? For example, some people are really careful about what type of gas they put into their cars, their motorcycles, their boats, their trucks. I know guys that ride motorcycles, and if it ain't the champagne of gasolines, they will not put it in their tank. People are really careful, well, sometimes they're careful about what they feed their children, but they're super careful about what type of food they feed their pets. I'm not sure what the mix-up and correlation there is, but there you go. But especially, we are well aware of what we put into our own bodies. In fact, what we put into our bodies is so important. It has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. Dietitians, personal trainers, and other health experts are all out to convince you and to convince me that they know what's best for your body to keep it running at peak performance. And you'll hear things like, hey, we know the secret. We figured it out. We know the secret to your body's health. And it's this: high carb, low fat diet. And others will say, no, it's not that. What it is, what your body really needs is all protein, some fat, no carbs. And others will tout, what you actually need is just a balanced diet, some carbs, some protein, and some fat. We're really aware that the fuel that goes into the things that matter to us ultimately determines their performance. But here's the thing. As much as we're aware of that, it's really ironic that you and I so easily disregard that basic piece of wisdom when it comes to one of the most important things in our lives, our minds. Because the same principle that holds true for fueling our bodies is true for our minds. In that what we fuel our mind with ultimately impacts our performance and our mental well-being. And so here's a question I'll throw out there, and you can just kind of roll this around. What are you feeding your mind? What are you feeding your mind? So for the next few minutes, I just want to introduce you to a couple of laws concerning your mind, my mind. And the first one might be called the law of cognition. And it goes like this: you are what you think. You are what you think. The way you think creates your attitude. The way you think shapes your emotions. The way you think determines your perspective. Here's what I mean. Positive people, we've all bumped into them. Maybe you are one. If you are, yay. But we've all bumped into positive people. And positive people are those people who habitually tend to think optimistic thoughts regardless of how bad their circumstances are. Because they are just hopeful and confident about the future. Which, by the way, is the very definition of optimism. Positive people are the ones who are always looking for that silver lining in the cloud. Things could be falling apart all around them, and they could list it off, this happened, that happened, and this terrible thing happened. And then at the end they go, but it could be worse, right? We all know those people. Negative people, on the other hand, tend to think thoughts that are pessimistic, regardless of how good their circumstances are. Check this out. I knew a guy, used to hang around him quite a bit, that constantly looked not for the silver lining in the cloud, but rather a cloud, preferably a dark black cloud. And it didn't matter how good his circumstances were. I remember for months he was out of work. The company he worked for kind of packed up and they left the island, and it left him out of work. And for months he searched for a job, couldn't find one. One day I bump into him and he says, "Guess what?" And I go, "What?" And he goes, "I found a job, a really good paying job." And I'm thinking, "Awesome, dude, that's great." And he goes, "Yeah, well, we'll see how long it lasts. I'll probably just get laid off again." It's just like, really? Your perspective, my perspective about everything flows out of what happens in our minds. And most, if not all, psychologists will tell you that. But the idea that you are what you think isn't some new discovery, some Freudian thing that we've discovered in the last 100 years or so. It's been around since humankind's been kind of crawling around this planet. Listen to these words from the Bible, written thousands of years ago. Here's what the author writes: "Be careful how you think. Your life is shaped by your thoughts." Later on in the same book, he writes this: "As someone thinks within himself, so he is." You are what you think. Paul, one of the most prolific writers in history, whose writings now make up almost half of what is now known as the New Testament, wrote this to some first century Christians in Rome. And he said this: "Don't copy the behavior and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think." You are what you think. Second law that has to do with our minds is what's referred to as the law of exposure, which is a fancy way of saying your mind will think most about what it is exposed to the most. Your mind will think most about what it is exposed to the most. Here's an example, okay? Now, I love about this church? It's so not judgmental, right? We don't judge anybody. We just kind of, listen to their story. So I'm going to tell you a story. No judgment, okay? This happened years ago when I was commercial fishing. We were holed up in the north end of the island in the thriving metropolis of Winter Harbor. It had a population of about 10 people, okay? And most of those were the fishermen that were there holed up waiting for the weather to break. And so all they have is a general store and a dock. And so we're stuck there and we're waiting for the weather to break so we can go to work. 10 days. It blew and rained like crazy. We couldn't go anywhere. Well, after about day 3, we had exhausted every movie that we had brought with us. We had a DVD player, if you remember what those are. And it was like, well, now what are we going to do? Because I wasn't really into staring at the crew that was sitting across from me for who knows how long. And then one day, somebody from another boat comes over and says, "Hey, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but here's something you could watch." And they throw it on the table. And it's the complete series, okay, remember, no judgment, of The Sopranos, okay? Tony Soprano and his family. Long story short, we watched, there's 86 episodes, or an hour each, 86 hours we watched day and night until we were done. And a really interesting thing happened. After about day 4, I started dreaming about The Sopranos. I'd wake up and I would think I was one of the gangsters or something. And my language changed. And suffice it to say, it wasn't all that angelic. What enters your mind repeatedly occupies your mind. and it'll eventually shape your mind, and ultimately it will express itself in what you do and who you become. Your mind absorbs and is impacted and reflects back whatever you regularly and routinely expose it to. And here's the thing, just like the law of gravity, you and I, we are not immune to this law of exposure. We're just not. It's just part of life. But here's the great thing. You can take a law and leverage it to your advantage. We can do the same thing with the law of cognition and the law of exposure. We can actually leverage them to work for us. If you or I want to stay hopeful in a world that is so steeped in negativity and pessimism, our best option to do that is to change our perspective. See the trees, as John Candy said. And that change starts here in our minds. By exposing ourselves to and thinking about things that build us and those around us up. I want to share some words from the Bible that it's like the best strategy for this. Listen to this. Even though they're written 2,000 years ago, these words have the power to transform the way you think and shift your perspective. Listen to this. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right. Think about things that are pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Fix, fasten, secure, link, embed, anchor your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right. Think, ponder, reflect on, meditate about things that are pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Man, those are awesome words. Think about such things. Yeah, imagine for a moment what this world would be like if it were filled with people who thought about such things. Imagine for a moment what it would be like if the blogs and the tweets and the Instagram posts that we read, the television shows and the movies we watch and the books we read and the music we listen to were filled with things that are true and noble and right and admirable. And I'm not saying don't listen to the 80s rock, because I do all the time. But you know what I mean. Think for a moment on how doing that could begin to change your perspective. And so with the time we have left, I want to kind of help us put this in an application so we can actually apply this. And I'm going to leave you with a couple of steps that the Bible teaches that you and I can take to help us stay positive and hopeful by changing our perspective. And the first and most important step in this is this: monitor your mind. Monitor your mind. Begin by becoming aware of the thoughts that habitually tend to run through your mind, because you and I have thoughts running through them all the time. But here's the thing. One of the dangerous things about us is we slip so deeply into certain mental patterns, we're not even aware of what those thoughts are anymore. And so here's a challenge for all of us, myself included, that as we go through the rest of today and tomorrow, the rest of the week, let's try and do our best to stop at those ordinary moments that happen throughout the day and ask ourselves, what is running through my mind right now? What am I focusing on right now? For example, here's how this could show up. Next time you're out driving and you get cut off, check what kind of thoughts are running through your mind. Are they excellent and praiseworthy and admirable or not? Because there's a couple of different ways you can go with that whole thing. You could think thoughts like, somebody roars in front of you, you have to hit the binders, and you could think, maybe the person driving that car that just cut me off is having a really bad day and they're just not thinking clearly. Or maybe you could just think, you know what, maybe they just didn't see me. It happens. Or you could be thinking something like, what an idiot. Like, what is your problem? Like, you check your blind spot, or maybe you can't because you are blind, right? Here's the thing in all this. Regardless, whatever you're thinking, you will behave according to those thoughts. Because those thoughts will give rise to feelings and certain behaviors. For instance, if you're thinking, what an idiot, maybe you're giving them the international salute that you're number one. I won't show you what that is, but you know what it is. It all starts here in the mind. Monitor your mind by becoming conscious of your thoughts. Second step is heed the law of exposure. Heed the law of exposure. And the best way to do that is by taking an honest look at what you're exposing your mind to. And ask yourself this question as you're doing that, as you're running that inventory. Are the things I'm exposing myself to, books, podcasts, blogs, even people, those things that I'm exposing myself to regularly, are they inclining me toward thoughts that are true and honorable and pure and loving and excellent? Or are they shifting me and pushing me the other way? Whenever possible, expose your mind to things that will incline you, move you toward the right kinds of thought. Because every source, whether good or not so good, every source that you expose your mind to will eventually move your life one way or the other. And I think one of the best ways when it comes to this law of exposure, one of the most helpful things that we can do is to expose our mind to God's word through actually reading it. To read the Bible on a regular basis. Doesn't have to be some long 2, 3, 4 hour thing. Just 2 minutes a day. Start with 2 minutes a day. Now, some of you might be thinking, the Bible, it's just, it's ancient. It's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with life today. It's just another religious book among a whole bunch of religious books. Well, I'll give you, it is ancient, but it's not irrelevant. It is full of timeless truths and principles and wisdom that you and I can, if we choose to, apply to our 21st century lives right here in Nanaimo. It's living and active and breathes. Listen to this. Here's some words written to a young pastor who was really struggling. He was surrounded by all kinds of negativity and pessimism, and people were calling him down, and he was just about ready to say, you know what? I don't need to do this anymore. And his protege, the guy that was his mentor, bringing him along, wrote a letter to him to encourage him. He said this, he says, remember, go back to what you know, because all Scripture is inspired by God and is useful to teach us what is true and to make us realize what is wrong in our lives. It corrects us when we are wrong and teaches us to do what is right. Throughout history, I'll say millions and millions, but it's probably countless people who regularly made it a point of reading their Bible, exposing their minds to the teaching of Jesus and to God and all that, experienced transformation in their lives. Check this out. I'm just going to read a couple of lines from some famous people in history. Listen to this. I am profitably engaged in reading the Bible. Take all of this book that you can by reason and the balance by faith, and you will live and die a better man. Today's vernacular would be person. It is the best book which God has given to man. Abraham Lincoln wrote that. Listen to these words. The Bible is the book of my life. It is the book I live with, the book I live by, and the book I want to die by. N.T. Wright, pastor and theologian, one of the foremost thinkers of our current age, lives in England. He's written hundreds of books. But perhaps the best quote I came across that really fits this scene, this scenario that we find ourselves in with all this worry and fear and angst is this one. It says, "I've read the last page of the Bible. It's all going to turn out all right." Billy Graham. Regular reading and meditating on a small section, just maybe a verse, couple of verses, a passage, if you do that on a regular basis, it will begin to change and heal your mind. It will change your thoughts, your emotions, and your perspective and bump them in a positive way. And, throughout the Bible, various authors write about the practice of meditation. And I know for a lot of people, and it used to be like this for me, you hear that word meditation, you think, well, that's all weird. I don't meditate. That's just like Middle Eastern stuff or something, right? I don't do it. But here's the thing. We all meditate. All of us. Here's what I mean. Do you know how to worry? Anyone know how to worry? Just me? You all worry from time to time, right? If you know how to worry, you know how to meditate. Because meditation is simply when you take a thought and you dwell on it. You think about it, you linger on it, and you absorb it, and it becomes a part of you. And that's what we do when we worry. We dwell and linger on a negative thought, and we just keep thinking about it. All of a sudden we start to get all freaked out about it. We can do the opposite. Think about things that are excellent and praiseworthy. Because whatever you expose your mind to has the power to influence your thoughts and ultimately your perspective on things. That's why we talk probably not enough around here about why being intentional and purposeful and setting aside some time each and every day to be alone with God and meditating on and even memorizing God's words in the Bible. It's key for us to stay hopeful in a seemingly hopeless world, to live out our vision, to unleash God's love on this city, to be the light that He has called us to be beacons of hope. It's hard to be a beacon of hope if you're all negative. And so I'm going to leave us with a challenge. I'm going to wrap up right here. I'm going to leave us with a challenge. Over the next few weeks, as we work our way through this series, let's meditate on and memorize the words that we've looked at today. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Let's just write those down and start reading them every day. Just stick it on the dashboard of your car, on your whatever works best for you. And let's see if by the end of the 3 weeks, if we start to do that, put those words into practice, own those words, let's just see how much our perspectives change. Really glad that you joined us this morning. I'm going to pray, then band's going to play a song for us, and we're going to celebrate communion. So stick around, but I invite you to pray with me now. God, there's, if one were to turn on the TV or the news feeds or even open up Facebook or whatever it happens to be, there is no shortage of fear and anxiety and worry and negativity. It's just everywhere. And the world seems so hopeless. It seems like it's out of control. But we know that you are ultimately in control. And when we learn to spend time with you, when we begin to develop and rip that muscle, it can help us look up instead of down and keep our eyes fixed on you and know that everything is going to be okay. Doesn't make it easy, but that's where it starts. It starts in the mind, and let that sift down into our heart that we know you're a God who loves us, that you saw all of this coming. None of this is catching you by surprise, and that you are always there with us. We thank you for that. And we pray all these things in your name.